My new roommate unzipped her dress. That's why no one wants me. I said, I do. The first time I saw my new roommate standing alone in the bright afternoon sunlight outside the apartment building, clutching a single faded suitcase as if it contained everything she had left in the world, I noticed something that everyone else seemed determined not to see. They looked away before she even reached the front door. They whispered. They judged. They avoided her without knowing her story. What happened next changed both of our lives forever, proving that sometimes the greatest act of love begins with the smallest act of kindness. Before we begin, if you believe kindness can heal broken hearts and everyone deserves a second chance, please like this video, leave a comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to the channel Wisdom Story House. Your support helps these stories reach more people who need them. My name is Rowan Mercer, and I had always believed that loneliness was something you simply learned to live with. After losing both of my parents within 2 years, I buried myself in work, rented a modest apartment, and convinced myself that keeping people at a distance was safer than risking another heartbreak. When my landlord announced that rising costs meant I would need a roommate or find another place to live, I reluctantly agreed. I expected someone cheerful or talkative, someone who would fill the apartment with music or laughter. Instead, a quiet woman named Celine arrived on a warm spring afternoon with tired eyes that looked much older than her age and a smile that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. She thanked me politely for opening the door and carried her own suitcase upstairs despite my offer to help. She spoke softly, never complained, and spent most evenings reading by the window while golden daylight faded into gentle sunsets. She always wore long sleeves, even on the hottest afternoons, and dresses with high collars that seemed unusual for the season. I noticed these things, but I respected her privacy. Everyone carries invisible burdens, and I had no desire to force mine onto someone else's shoulders. The neighbors, however, were not so kind. Within days, rumors drifted through the building like unwanted smoke. Some claimed she was hiding from someone. Others insisted she had done something terrible in another town. A few simply decided she was strange because she avoided social gatherings. It amazed me how quickly people could create stories about someone they had never bothered to know. Every time I heard another cruel assumption, I remembered how grief had once made people uncomfortable around me, and I refused to become another person who judged without understanding. Over the following weeks, our apartment slowly became a place of quiet comfort. We shared simple breakfasts, exchanged books, watered the small plants on the balcony together, and sometimes watched birds gather in the nearby park during peaceful afternoons. We didn't need many words. Sometimes healing begins when two wounded people simply exist in the same safe space. One Saturday, I returned home earlier than expected after a meeting was cancelled. The apartment was unusually silent except for the sound of soft crying coming from Celine's room. I hesitated outside her door, unsure whether to knock or leave her alone. Before I could decide, the door slowly opened. She stood there with tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling so badly that she could barely hold the edge of the door. She whispered that she was sorry for making noise and said she didn't want anyone to see her like this. I gently told her she never needed to apologize for being human. She invited me inside. The afternoon sunlight spilled across the wooden floor, creating warm patterns that contrasted sharply with the sadness filling the room. Family photographs sat neatly arranged on a small table, but every frame held only landscapes, never people. It was as though every memory involving another person had disappeared. For several long moments, neither of us spoke. Then, with remarkable courage, Celine slowly reached behind her neck and unzipped the back of her dress. My breath caught. Large scars stretched across her back and shoulder, the pale reminders of burns that had forever changed her appearance. They told a story of unimaginable pain without saying a single word. Her voice shook as she explained that years earlier, a devastating apartment fire had trapped her inside. She had survived only because firefighters refused to give up searching for one final resident after everyone believed the building was empty. The burns healed, but people's reactions never did. Every relationship ended the same way. Friends slowly disappeared. Strangers stared. One man she had planned to marry quietly left after saying he couldn't imagine building a future with someone whose body looked like hers. Since then, every new beginning had ended with rejection before anyone learned who she truly was. She lowered her eyes and whispered the words that had haunted her for years. "That's why no one wants me." The room felt impossibly still. I wasn't looking at scars. I was looking at extraordinary courage. I saw someone who had endured unbearable pain, survived, continued helping others through volunteer work at hospitals, smiled despite carrying heartbreak every day, and still found enough hope to begin again in a new city. Without hesitation, I answered softly. "I do." Not because I pitied her. Not because I wanted to rescue her. But because I genuinely wanted to know the remarkable person standing before me. She stared at me with disbelief, as though kindness had become a language she no longer understood. Tears returned, but these were different. They were tears released after years of carrying a burden alone. From that day forward, everything changed. Healing didn't happen overnight. There were still moments when Celine instinctively covered herself whenever visitors arrived. She still avoided mirrors on difficult mornings. She still believed people were staring whenever we walked through crowded streets. But each day became slightly easier. We started taking afternoon walks through the botanical gardens where colorful flowers bloomed without caring whether one petal was perfect and another was torn by the wind. We volunteered together at a children's reading program, where young kids cared only about exciting stories and warm smiles. One little girl hugged Celine after story time and asked if she could come back next week because she had the nicest voice in the whole library. The child never noticed the scars. Children often see hearts before appearances. Watching that simple moment transformed something inside Celine. Weeks turned into months, and the apartment that once felt quiet because of loneliness now felt peaceful because of belonging. Laughter slowly replaced silence. Houseplants multiplied across every windowsill. Friends we met through volunteering visited often, accepting Celine exactly as she was. The world hadn't changed completely, but our little corner of it certainly had. One sunny afternoon, nearly a year after she moved in, we attended a neighborhood picnic in the park. Several people who had once whispered about her approach to apologize. They admitted they had judged her unfairly before knowing anything about her life. Celine accepted every apology with grace, proving once again that scars can harden a heart or deepen its compassion. She had chosen compassion. That evening, as golden sunlight painted the apartment walls, we sat on the balcony watching the city settle into another peaceful day. She smiled in a way I had never seen before, not carefully, not cautiously, but freely. She finally believed she deserved happiness. I realized then that love is rarely about finding someone without flaws. It is about finding someone whose scars tell the story of incredible strength, and choosing to stand beside them anyway. Years later, people often asked how our story began. They expected a romantic tale filled with grand gestures and dramatic moments. Instead, I always told them the truth. It began with listening instead of judging. It began with seeing a person instead of a wound. It began with one simple sentence spoken at exactly the right moment. I do. If kindness had not answered despair that afternoon, 2 lonely lives might have continued drifting separately forever. Instead, compassion became the bridge that carried us toward hope, healing, and a future neither of us believed was possible. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who may need encouragement today, leave a heartfelt comment below, and subscribe to Wisdom Story House for more inspiring stories that remind us humanity is still full of hope. Special request, comment, true beauty lives in the heart. Sometimes the world teaches us to notice what is broken before we notice what is beautiful. But the people who change lives are those who look beyond appearances and choose kindness over judgment. Every scar tells a story of survival. Every wounded heart deserves someone willing to listen. And sometimes, the words that save another person's life are not complicated at all. They are simply the quiet promise that says, I see you. I accept you. You are not alone anymore. That is where real love begins, and that is the kind of love that can change the world, one heart at a time.